Unpaid labor in Canada's airline industry is making headlines and shaking up the sector. Imagine working on a plane, performing essential tasks but not receiving compensation unless you're actually in the air. Sounds shocking, right? But here's where it gets controversial. The union representing Air Canada's flight attendants claims this very scenario is all too real, fueling a strike that has now left thousands of passengers stranded across the country. Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu has called these allegations deeply disturbing. In response, the federal government is opening an official investigation to determine whether airline staff are indeed being asked to work for free during those ground-based yet critical periods, such as boarding, briefing, or prepping for takeoff. For those unfamiliar with how airlines compensate their crews, many flight attendants argue that much of their work on the ground, including safety procedures and managing passengers, is just as vital as what happens in the air. Hajdu shared in a recent interview that so far there haven't been formal complaints from airline workers about unpaid duties, but she isn't stopping there. She's tasked her department with reaching out to unions and employers across Canada's airline sector. This comprehensive review of their collective agreements could take several weeks, but the implications are huge. And this is the part most people miss. If investigators find loopholes that allow unpaid work, Hajdu is ready to push for new laws to shut them down. She assures Canadians, if we identify situations where employees are not being paid for their labor, we'll make sure there's a legal fix, one way or another. This probe comes at a tense moment. Air Canada flight attendants have defied a federal back-to-work order and are pressing ahead with their walkout, despite the government's efforts to force binding arbitration. The result? A third day of grounded flights, frustrated travelers, and a public debate over labor rights. The Canada Industrial Relations Board, CIRB, is now deeply involved, with the process possibly headed to federal court. Meanwhile, mediation talks are underway, though details remain sparse. Thousands of passengers are caught in the crossfire as Air Canada cancels flights and tries to boost airport staffing to assist those left stranded. Labor activists nationwide are furious about Ottawa's repeated use of a rarely invoked section of the Labor Code to end strikes and enforce arbitration, not just in airlines, but recently in port and railway disputes too. Is this government overreach? Was it a mistake for the feds to intervene so quickly in the Air Canada standoff? Hajdu describes the decision as a very difficult choice, made because both the union and company said negotiations were deadlocked as the economic fallout from flight cancellations mounted. But, and this could spark debate, the government isn't planning to recall Parliament for another back-to-work law. Ultimately, it's now up to Air Canada and the union, Hajdu explained, insisting that both sides need to temper their demands to make progress. Or, as she puts it, everyone has to put a little water in their wine when it comes to bargaining. No one gets everything they want. Even Prime Minister Mark Carney weighed in, noting his disappointment at the stalemate and highlighting the vital role flight attendants play, not just in making travel possible, but in keeping Canadians safe. It's essential that they're paid fairly every step of the way, Carney said, reiterating public support for the workers. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Should airline staff be compensated for all their work, not just time spent flying? Is the government right to intervene, or is it undermining workers' right to strike? Can airlines operate safely and fairly without risking labor unrest in the future? Drop your thoughts, agreements, or disagreements below, because this debate is far from over.